Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Can you guess what the weather's doing again today? Wonderful. Anyway, I thought I'd just have a look over my RO unit. Now, this unit came from eBay. It costs less than £40. It's a very small unit. You can get much bigger units that produce many more gallons per hour. But although I probably am going to need a fair old bit of RO water this summer, this can keep up for me. Okay, the way they work is, firstly, they must have high pressure mains. If you haven't got the high pressure, they won't work. Now let's find out why. So high pressure mains goes into here, passes through that first chamber. That's got a very basic filter in it to get out particles that are almost big enough to see. So I don't really have any of that. This is our mains drinking water, very high in salts and calcium. Not much of that would get removed there. Water then comes through here and goes into a carbon filter. Now that gets rid of a lot of stuff like calcium, and we're getting down to small particles now. Comes out the end of there and goes into the main membrane. That's the real RO function that goes on in there, because whatever goes in that end comes out that end pure and then goes into my little bottle down there, or tub. Unfortunately with RO units, you can't see it very well, but the level of water that you discard is quite high compared with what comes out of the good end. That's just how they work. You have to live with that. Now in the summertime, the water doesn't get wasted. It doesn't go down the drain. It gets put in watering cans and used around the garden, so it's not wasted. But yeah, this little unit is going to have to work its arse off, quite honestly, because today, well, let's go inside. Right, before we have a talk about the orchids, we better have a talk about me. Now, I got up this morning and I can't get warm. Now, that's always a bad sign. I'm going to get something. I'm thinking of taking a couple of glugs of that fungicide. But, yeah, perhaps it's my turn. Everybody gets a little cold or something now and again. I very rarely do, so if I've got to have one, then I'll have to live with it. But I don't class a cold as an illness. It's an annoyance. It's not a flipping illness. You do not need to go to hospitals and doctors. It's a flipping cold. Live with it and live through it. And if you want to take medicines, do so, but I don't bother. I just live with it, and they usually last about 2 days for me, so it's not the end of the world. Anyway, RO water. We're going to be getting through a lot. After the little investigations that I've done, I have salt deposits in my pots and on my mounts. Now today is mount watering day. They've had 2 days since they were done, so it's their turn, and they're going to get an absolute soaking. And the idea is, so I've tipped this up so that I don't need to put too much in there at a time. The idea is, start with pure RO water and start watering, yeah? And then after I've done a few, take a TDS reading and see how much the TDS is climbing. And as soon as I see it climbing, then that water goes down the drain and we start with some new stuff. It's going to be a really good flush. I can't use clean RO water for every single plant. I've got to let some run off, get used again. But certainly with the mounts, you know, they've only got a small amount of moss. It's not a big deal. And a good flush through with virtually pure water is going to clean them off. It's always in the orchid world, isn't it? You know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I was really looking forward to using my new fertiliser and really getting things off to a good start. And now it's stalled again because I can't do that with the pots and the media and the mounts in the state they're in now. I've just proven to myself that I've got salts build up. That's happened through the winter, slowly but surely, and plants don't help much because they're not growing much in the winter. Oh, that's nice. Yay! That wasn't there last time I looked. That's one of the Melissa Bryony, that one is. Beautiful blooms on that. It's not a very strong spike, but then it's only just started. You know, that's literally poked up there in the last day or two, because it certainly wasn't there before. There's a few nobelies poking out in amongst there. See, I'm going to have to start rearranging things. This is the problem. I need the high light for the nobelies, but they're big plants. So they're at the back of the shelf. You know, when they bloom, they're at the back of the shelf. So I have to rearrange some things. You know, things that are in bloom, I try and bring forward so that I can see them. Yeah, I mean, this is where I keep most of what's in bloom, here under my nose, so when I walk out here I see them straight away. Anyway, that's the job for the day, flushing time. And this is going to take quite a while. We're going to be out the other end of January before I've done this. We're into February, longer days and everything. So timing should be good. But, you know, I mean, most of the pots have recently been watered. If I start drowning them again, flushing them out before they dry off, I'm going to start messing the media up and probably starting some root rot. So I can't do it. I've got to let them do their wet-dry cycle. So until that happens, I can't flush the pots. Ugh. And I mean, if you think this lot over here, they've just been fed with the new fertiliser. So I've just compounded the problem. So, yep, we have to flush. It has to be done. It's got to be done thoroughly, and then we get a nice clean start for the growing season. Like I say, wouldn't it be nice to take 2 steps forward and end up 3 steps farther ahead now and again, instead of taking 2 forward and 1 backwards all the time? Still, that's the chore for today, get the mounts done. And then in a few days' time we'll be back to this side of the grow room and throwing some water on these. They can have a really good flush at that particular point. And then we move on to this lot. They'll be the next day. They can have a really good flush. And quite honestly, I want to do it twice. So I've then got to wait about a week, depending on weather, before I can do it again. And then we'll be back round here. Then we'll be over here. Then we can start building up the fertiliser. It's a tedious process, but you know, it's my fault for letting it build up in the first place. And having been using such a weak fertiliser, most of that salt build-up is not from that fertiliser. There's so little in it. Probably we would be stronger. But the salt build-up is because I've been using half RO water and half of the filtered water. And although the filter does a reasonable job, it does leave calcium in there. You know, so effectively it's still relatively hard water. And with the plants not using it at a fair old rate, because it's winter time, it's just built up. So it's got to be dealt with. So that's today's job, and update me notes and things like that. So a bit of a tedious day, and as I said, I think I'm coming down with something, so I've just got to try and stay warm, you know, keep out of that rain. Miserable weather. I'm sure that's what does it in this flipping country. There's more colds in this country than the rest of the world put together, I think. And it's this damp, miserable weather that we get. Still, spring's on the way. Look on the bright side, as they say. Okay, thanks for dropping by. Knowing me, I'll probably add a bit on now. Methinks this is going to take a while. I've watered 4 Tolumnias. Now, these don't have high moss content. You know, okay, there's some moss on there. This one's lucky because most of its roots are around the back. But just because you've got bare roots on a piece of bark does not mean that you don't get a salt and calcium build-up. They're still there. They've still got to have a good wash. But I've done 4 plants in that small amount of water. And that TDS reading, okay, it's a small amount of water, so the effect is quite dramatic. The TDS reading's gone from 10 to 45, and I've done 4 plants, and I set my limit at a TDS of 40. When it gets to 40, the water goes in the bin and we put some fresh in. I'm going to get through this at a fair old rate. The RO unit's running, so hopefully the little beastie can keep up with me. But I may have to have breaks. I may actually run out of water faster than that little unit can produce it for this particular exercise anyway. I mean, I wouldn't normally be discarding water at such a rate, but that's just how it's got to be. But that's the level that was just in. What are relatively small mounts. So there's some stuff coming out, and certainly all the mounts are going to get done twice. And I really ought to do all the pots twice as well. So we're going to get through an awful lot of water at the wrong time of year and give everything a really good clean up. Let's start from scratch, and then we can give them some sensible feed in some pure water and get everything going again. And that should coincide with the real start to the growing season, which in the UK really is towards the end of February. That's where we get up towards the 11 hours again. Not there at that point, but extending at a fair old rate through February. So things start kicking into action towards the end of Feb. Okay, let's get on with it. I've even got the snuffles now. Ugh. Guess what? Another problem, another delay. Of course, the water that I'm producing, the fresh RO water, is flipping freezing cold. So I'm having to stand the container in some hot water and try and raise the temperature a bit before I can progress. More delays. Still, it's a learning experience, I suppose. There should always be a bright spot in any day. Do you know, I'd forgotten all about this opening up. This tiny little Cattleya is opening its blooms. I think one's going to blast, but maybe two. But I mean, it was a rescue plant. I didn't expect it to bloom, so anything's a bonus. But yeah, lovely colours, tiny little blooms, but nonetheless typical Cattleya shape and lovely colours. I'll be interested to see how those colours change as they age. I got a feeling they're not going to last long, but we'll wait and see. At least they opened. So that was nice. I know this is a first in my grow room, but I can't get enough of this one. I just cannot get enough of these blooms. I want more. Anyway, just as an example, that's quite a large mount. It's got a fair bit of bark on it, and a lot of the root ends have just gone. Over time, not all at once, but over time, including that. Now that's new roots just stopped growing. There's a few more like that looking around. So this plant's had an extra special care. There's lots of deep crevices and nooks and crannies on that bark. I've just soaked the whole thing with hydrogen peroxide. So hopefully anything, little round things with shells that might have been lurking in there, munching the roots, should hopefully be now frazzled. And then in addition to that, and that hydrogen peroxide may have had an effect on this, although would it? Maybe not. I've just given that plant a flush, like I'm doing all the mounts. That one plant took the TDS reading up from 11 to 110. One plant being flushed put that much undissolved salts, now dissolved because of the continuous flushing with water, in there. So although I flushed that plant, I haven't, because it puts so much salts into the water that I'm flushing it with now what is salty water. So I'm going to have to do that one again. I'm going to do that one again today, but I am waiting for the poor old RO unit to catch up. I'm not going to be able to do all of the plants I wanted to do today simply because I'm going to run out of RO water, and then I'm going to run out of day. I don't want to be putting mounts into tonight when it may be cold absolutely dripping wet, because they're getting one hell of a drowning. You know, my plants are now a lot wetter than they should be for this time of year. So I think some plants are just going to have to wait till tomorrow, but by then I'll have filled up all of my containers and I know I can finish the job. Vandas are going to have to wait. They can go a day, they'll be fine. But I'll go as far as I can, but just to show how much build-up can happen in one single plant. And with that, you're damaging new roots. You're effectively burning them, especially this time of year when they don't get watered as often. Anyway, another little update. And the best one yet. This Syringus it is a large mount. It's got a lot of roots and it's got a substantial amount of moss on it. Flushing that one has just taken the water from 11 to 180. Now I wouldn't feed my orchids with a TDS that level, or a lot of them. So that's an outrageous amount that's built up in that one over the time period. And it hasn't been flushed. You know, the last few pours of water over there were using water at a TDS of 150 plus. So it's not flushed. I've just flushed it and it's still not flushed. So I'm going to have to do it again. But the difficulty is that plant is now absolutely soaking wet. And I suppose in theory, if it's soaking wet, it can't flipping get any wetter, can it? So with some clean water, plants that are in this particular state can get flushed twice today, providing I can keep up with the water. But that's an outrageous amount of fertiliser and salts build up in that poor plant. Oh well, hopefully with a fresh clean start and flushing more frequently, it'll do better with its root system. Can only try. Another quick update. I applied a theory. Now this one was heavy in undissolved salts. It had a good flush and washed an incredible amount out. But the water that was being used became contaminated, continued to flush, etc. But the plant got left an hour, absolutely soaking wet. So any more undissolved salts would now be dissolved because everything's soaking wet. So it would have got everything into the form that can be flushed easier. So I've just given it another good flush with clean water again, and this time the TDS only went up from 10ish to just under 50. So it's done the job. The plant's now quite clean. It's also soaking wet. That's not going to do it any good at all. And as a consequence, I've whacked the heater on. Now, two reasons for putting the heater on. Me, and trying to dry these plants off, because they do not normally get wet like that at this time of year. That's a summer thing, not middle of flipping winter. But it's done the job, and I think I might now have enough water to finish today. It's sort of working. I might just get there and get what I wanted to do done today finished. But the heater's going to stay on way into the evening and keep this place a lot warmer than I would normally do. I just need to try and dry these plants off a bit. Okay. Okay, I managed to get everything done that I wanted to do, and now I've got to fill up all my containers. I phoned my sister and said, can you save containers for me? Here in the UK, most people buy their milk in 4-pint sort of opaque plastic containers, so they're not clear, so they do block out some light. And yeah, people get through a fair bit of milk, so I've got a few people to save some containers for me. But I just thought I'd end on that. This is this Maxillaria arachnidiflora, probably. I know it's got arachnid in it, it's something to do with spiders, but it looks like that flower spike's not long for opening, which would be good because I don't know what this is going to look like. But what it does look like is a single bloom per spike. And that's not unusual for Maxillaria types, but that's going to be interesting, and there's quite a few more spikes coming on behind that. And another nice little thing, although this looks like a tatty looking object, which it is. I mean, it is a deciduous dendrobium, so canes do drop their leaves, and that's what it's doing. This got took upstairs for a rest, and then with a little bit of research I found out, I have to excuse the heater, but it's just it. I found out that this one shouldn't be rested as such, just a reduction in water, not the complete rest. But just have a look around the base there. There's 4 new growths kicking out. They've just started in the last week. Now I wonder if they would have started had this been rested. And the answer's probably no. But anyway, it's kicking some life out, so good. Get some new canes on there, and we'll see what we do. Right, conclusions for this flushing thing. Main conclusion is I've been slack and haven't been doing it properly and need to get my act together. Yep, so from now on we'll deal with that. Now that's not too difficult. But other observations, things, bearing in mind I've only done mounts today, a couple of baskets as well. Look at that thing, it's absolutely soaked, poor devil. But so we're mainly talking about mounts, so we're talking about pieces of bark, with some moss. Now one thing I found is a much, much higher level of undissolved salts were dissolved and washed out from old moss. The new moss didn't have much in there. So that's something that may be of use to people. It's not going to be of any use to me because things are just going to get flushed on a much more frequent basis. But yeah, that was an observation. So the stuff in new moss hardly dropped anything. The oldest moss was heavy. I mean, that was the worst one of the lot, the Arangus. That was really bad. And okay, so that's the mounts flushed. The pots can't be done until they're ready to be watered. I can't have soaking pots and then soak them again before they've gone through their dry cycle, or they'll be wet too long in low temperatures, which just doesn't do a lot of these orchids any good. So I'm not going down that road. I'll just patiently wait, and then they can have a hell of a good flush. And unfortunately, next time round, they're going to get it again. So I'm going to have 2 consecutive thorough flushes on everything in here. I would say the exception's the Vandas. Now they're still going to get a flush. The only difference in the way that I'll flush those is when I soak them in the bucket, I'll just soak them in pure water. Job done. Probably only need to be done once because they can sit in there for quite a while, have a shake, sit in there for a bit longer and have another shake, and whatever is on those roots is gone. They're easy to do. It's anything with moss bases that's in pots and mounts and things. So I'll draw this one to a close then. It's all bits and bobs, but that's how the day's been. And I did finally get warm and the snuffles have gone. But the telltale sign will be when I get up tomorrow morning. You all know the signs, don't you? You look like you're going to get something and you shake it off. And then the next day, bang, you've got it. So we'll see how we get up in the morning. But I'm not sure much is going to get watered in here tomorrow. So I'll see how I get on. But that'll do for today. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.